I would have never thought of being in the restaurant business as a career.
How much longer did you stay on before you decided to retire?
My very first job was in a restaurant. I learned an awful lot in that first job, and especially in an Italian restaurant. Early lessons. I didn't wait for anybody to teach me.
You knew very clearly that it wasn't your job to be a career musician. And how did that happen for you?
There were a couple of events that preceded it. But I would say that for most people, they end up in a place that they didn't imagine. When you're going to do something, especially when somebody's paying you to do it, give it 100% and learn as much while you're there. Certainly, that's what benefited me at every station along the way.
How do we not end up playing the trumpet and end up at Burger King?
It was an unbelievable professional and personal experience. One restaurant in the territory was generating 18,000 to the area representative. And this is advice that I give to youth, especially.
What's good, crew? Daniel here, and this is Dine Grind, the show that plates up kitchen grit with entrepreneurial hustle. Quick shout out before we fire up the convo. Years ago, I wiped out on a slick kitchen floor and paid for it, in medical bills and pain. So I teamed up with a top orthopedic surgeon and a fellow restaurateur to build Snibs. Non-slip all-day shoes made for folks who grind on their feet. Proud sponsor of this podcast. Grab yours at snibs.co. Now, I'm very excited for today's guest. He is a legend in the industry. His name is Don Fox. He steered Firehouse Subs from 65 stores regionally into over 1,200 units with over $1 billion in sales. Not only that, he just let me know that he's about to cross $100 million mark in giving back through his community. He's snagged NRN's Operator of the Year, and he is recently retired, which I don't see him retiring anytime soon in my mind. We're going to get into all of that. And I just wanted to also thank you that one of the longest catering shifts of my life ended with a hook and ladder sub, and that saved my life. So aprons on, service starts now. Thanks, Don.
Terrific. Thanks for having me on, Daniel.
Oh, it's my pleasure. So I would love to go way back when you were just a young teenager, I'm assuming. I'm guessing you started young, and we're in the dish pit. For our viewers to know, I would love to know how you got started in hospitality and how has that shaped you into who you are today?
My very first job was in a restaurant, a Italian full-service restaurant. It was owned by a family in Lakewood, New Jersey. And I had a couple of other high school buddies that were already working there. And my first job was as a dishwasher. And by the way, this was back in the days of completely manual dishwashing, no machines, and didn't even have a 3-compartment sink. It was just a 2-compartment sink back then. There was no such thing as sanitizer. It was a whole different world. And I learned an awful lot in that first job, and especially in an Italian restaurant. In fact, one of my earliest lessons was make sure that you're best friends with the person who stirs the sauce pot.
And why is that?
Because you're getting that sauce pot at the end of the night to clean. And
Wow,
your job is made more or less difficult by how frequently that has been stirred all night.
Yeah.
So old-time dishwashers usually get that. So I love that environment. At the outset, it was just a job and not an easy one. I had, I wish I could remember his last name. The owner, young guy, and other family members of his worked there. His name was Vinny. And
of course,
boy, and it was the classic Italian family with the mother-in-law working there, his wife, the hostess and waitress on the team. And yeah, you could have filmed a TV show around it. But it was a great environment with very high standards. Vinny inspected everything. If you were washing dishes and pots and pans and pizza trays, and I mean everything had to be immaculate. Not a speck of carbon. Everything got inspected when it went back on a rack or on a shelf. It was a lot of hard work on your feet in the dish pit. Not much air conditioning that I can recall. And in fact, I quickly learned that my most coveted promotion that I could ever get was about 8 feet away to get to the salad station.
Okay, yes, when you get your first prep item.
Yes, I was dying. And again, early lessons. I didn't wait for anybody to teach me. I constantly looked over my shoulder or talked to the person who was working that station and observed what was happening, so that when I got tapped on the shoulder to go over there, I was had a head start on it. And they progressively, work your way through the stations. And back then, like most kids, it was a job to have some spending money, start to save some money for college. I came from a very modest family, blue collar, middle class. No one in my immediate family had attended college. I would have been
Oh,
really the first one to attend, at least in my generation uh, of the family and extended family. Little did I know. I think back to those days. I think there was probably 1973, 74. If anyone had ever told me what was ahead of me from a career standpoint, I would have never believed it. I didn't hold that as an ambition. My career aspiration, even at that point, was to be a professional musician. That's what I was going to eventually enroll in college for as a trumpet player. I would have never thought of being in the restaurant business as a career. At that point, it was a utility. It was a means to an end, just financially.
You said something really interesting there, and I've noticed this with employees. There are people who come into an environment and you give them a task and they do that exact task, right? And maybe they'll do it well, maybe they won't do it well, but that's about the extent of what they're going to do. There's the other person who comes in and sees, oh, there's an opportunity to help out on the line over here. There's an opportunity to talk to the line cook about not making that pot dirtier so that I could have less work. And I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that this might be one of those things that's very Dawn. And one of the things that, whether you were going to be a trumpet player, you were probably going to be a great trumpet player. And maybe you are already. And I'm picturing the long hair back then, where when you were rocking. But I do think that is something. And do you think that habit, that trait, is still instilled in you today, or what did you learn from those early moments?
Sure, sure, absolutely. And this is advice that I give to youth, especially to this day, whether I'm speaking to, younger adults or college students. I love speaking on college and university campuses. Most people will not end up doing as a career what they thought they would be doing, even once they're in college. Life it just generally goes that way. Not for all, but I don't have a study in front of me, but I would say that for most people, they end up in a place that they didn't imagine.
I never thought I would be here. So yeah,
Yeah, and
exactly.
so the key is, and fortunately, this was just part of my work ethic from the beginning, which I really have to thank my parents for, more than anybody else. It wasn't something that somebody taught me with intention. It was more learning by example or seeing it in my parents and the way they pursued their work and their life. When you're going to do something, especially when somebody's paying you to do it, give it 100% and learn as much while you're there. Certainly, that's what benefited me. At every station along the way, I gave it 100% and I looked around and I embraced knowledge, learning not just what I needed to do my job, but looking beyond that. And it was extraordinarily beneficial. It always helped better prepare me for whatever the next, perhaps unexpected opportunity was in life. And if somebody doesn't give it 100%, and if they're not continuously learning, I can assure them that they're simply not going to be in an optimum position to take advantage of opportunities, or opportunities will never be presented to them because of it. And by the way, I always, with great intention, I always say 100%. And this is an original thought on my end, what I'm going to say. I can't even remember where I heard it, but I certainly believe in it. There is no such thing as more than 100%. When anybody says they gave something 110%, 1,000%, no. All you did was discover what your actual 100% is, and you've been doing something less.
It's binary for you. It's ones and zeros. Yeah, you're either doing 100% or you're not.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Okay. I'm sure your parents are incredibly proud of who you became and whenever they got to see you leave that. But I would say foregoing college and creating what you've created and how much you've given back, it's pretty beautiful to even be speaking with you here, And so good job. You're working in the restaurant, you're working with Vinny, and then all of a sudden you want to go to become a trumpet player. So this is something I'm sure very passionate. You've been practicing trumpet for a long time. How do we not end up playing the trumpet and end up at Burger King? Walk me
Yeah. So the just one an important step in between.
please.
I had left that Italian restaurant after about a year. It was my senior year in high school. Went to work for Six Flags amusement parks, a great
Okay.
adventure in New Jersey. A lot of listeners may be familiar with that. And in food service, and I was promoted into management when I was 18 years old during that summer before I went off to college at Glassboro State College, which is now Rowan University in New Jersey as a music major. Had to save all the money that I needed to pay for tuition that first semester. I didn't have enough money to pay for the second semester, which was part of the reason when the end of the calendar year rolled around and was getting ready for the second semester. I didn't have the money and decided to drop out and just go play, and started playing in with a band, and we did gigs along the Jersey Shore scene. That was an interesting time because back then I might make $10 a night playing in the bar gig. Now
Yeah.
granted in 1976, $77, but you're not living on that. So I kept at it within Six Flags, and I was promoted and moved into a equivalent of a restaurant manager position, and then a district manager position within the park. And then when I turned 22, decided that music was not going to be my way forward. Bit of a epiphany. I can still remember that moment very well, and thought, well, to accomplish other things that I might want to do in life, particularly those that might be tied back to financial success, I needed to do something else. Now, I'd had about 6 years in food service experience, and that seemed like the natural thing to go to. And unlike a lot of people, I really enjoyed it. So I figured, okay, let me leverage my experience. And that's what led to Burger King. So I moved to Florida from New Jersey and joined BK. This was 1980 in the Tampa market. And they were predominantly company owned restaurants back then. I had to take a step back to be an assistant manager. The fact that I was managing multi unit operations in an amusement park, I guess, didn't counted for enough to get me the job, but not to enter in above an assistant manager level. I look back on it, and no surprise, again, 22 years old coming in. I thought more highly of myself than probably was warranted. But that was okay. Step back in, and now I'm with a professional restaurant company, and then really learning my craft in that environment. And BK did a great job. A lot of great training programs, not just in the technical things of operating a Burger King, but a lot of the softer skills in
Yeah.
human resource, people management. I'd say especially for that time frame, 1980. That was a very formative period for me. I was in restaurant level operations from 1980 to I think about 86 as a restaurant manager. Before then, I moved into multi-unit operations, which I think for people that decide to make a career of restaurants, and especially within the QSR arena, QSR and fast casual, I'll put that together. That's a primary ambition
To
because
get the multi-unit. Yeah.
yeah, getting into multi-unit, not only in terms of what it does from a financial standpoint, but in terms of some quality of life and just being able to unleash your potential. I have unbelievable respect and admiration for people within the industry that go for many, many years, decades, sometimes their entire career in unit
In the
level
same role.
operations. It
Yeah.
is, to this day, it's the most demanding job that I ever had, above and beyond all the responsibilities of being a CEO. The hardest job was being a restaurant manager.
Yeah, I mean, you're always on, and you're dealing with people as a primary source of success, and yeah, that gets to be really tough. I hate to go back, but I'm so curious because I saw it on your face that you remember the exact moment, and I think for a lot of our listeners, they're either already successful operators or they want to be a food operator. And how did you know that? Like, because I read it, like you knew for it very clearly that it wasn't your job to be a career musician. And how did that happen for you? And how did you know it was the right thing? Was there a particular moment?
There were a couple of events that preceded it. I've been playing in the same band for about 3, almost 4 years, and that band decided to reform and drop the horn section. So when you're the trumpet player, that's not good news
No, not
when
good
you
news.
hear that. So I was as I was faced with a practical decision too of okay, I've got to pick up and look for another gig, which I did at first, but it wasn't really very long into that process that I realized, all right, this was likely to be a very sort of transient type of life. That it was a bit of a wake up call after seeing that first professional relationship severed. Being a complete victim, I had in a sense. I don't want to make that sound overly dramatic, but victim in the sense of I had no say in it whatsoever. I had
Yeah.
no capacity. Wasn't like I was going to persuade the leaders of the band, the primary creators of the band, because we were doing a lot of original music and looking to pick up a recording contract. Yeah, I was just going to be subject to the decision, and unless I had been of the had the talent, the wherewithal, the which I didn't at the time, to create my own band, like to fully control my own destiny on the music front, I was probably going to live a life of some uncertainty again. And as much as I loved it, as still to this day, and I still play, and I love it as much as ever. To fast forward for a moment, I had a chance to during my Firehouse time to get on stage with Earth, Wind, and Fire and do three
Wow.
songs with them. I often
Cool.
think that if I had stayed as a professional musician, I probably would have never played with Earth, Wind, and Fire.
You never know what's going to lead you where, I guess, you know?
And no, again, life takes you in directions again that you can never ever predict. But here, as an aside, though, and this is again an important thing I coach people on. You have these passions in life, and I'd say it's not unusual for people early in their career decision process. You'll think that they want to pursue professionally that thing that they really love. Well, just because life doesn't work out that way and you don't do it, my gosh, don't give up on those passions. And the more successful that you are in your eventual career, you'll find ways to parlay that, if you so choose. So I think about great moments that I've had in music, and even more relevant are the successes and the things that I've pursued in terms of writing and military history. Because by the way, if not a musician, my second desire was originally not in the restaurant business. When I was deciding where to go to school, if I hadn't been a music major, I would have gone to study history. I had a intense interest in World War II, in particular, military history.
And you just released is it your second book or third?
Third book came out
Third
last
book.
September, and then I've got two more books they'll published. They'll come out at the end of this year, early 2026. So here I am with five books published, and all driven out of passion for doing it even to this day. I'm blessed I don't have to do it for financial motivation. The book that I'll have coming out on the history of Firehouse Subs, which is just one of the five books, is not military history. All of my royalties are being donated to the Public Safety Foundation for that. None of the writing that I've been done is financially motivated. It's all passion and purpose driven
Well,
to
and I
get
think that's
to get
important.
stories out there.
And it's important how I've interviewed a lot of great people, and the people that I really have so much admiration for are these people that can do so many different things and then do them. I think we all have it in us to be, multifaceted, to have skill sets in different categories, different businesses, different passions. But it's the ability to write the book. It's the ability to take the risk and put yourself, hey, I've never written a book. I'm going to go do that. And I admire that in you. And I think we're going to see that as a common theme, that's really special for you. But okay, so we're at Burger King. It's the 80s. I think the POS might have just came out, the point of sale system. You're rocking and rolling. You're learning how to build. And you spent a lot of time there, right? I mean, how many years in total?
Yeah, 23 years.
And
And
just like the band saying no more horns, they came to Dawn and they said no more Dawn.
I want to touch on during those 23 years, because this comes into play. It's relevant to my eventual Firehouse experience. In 1989, I was asked to transfer from my operations position. I was a franchise field consultant in the late 80s. And I was asked to transfer down to Miami to the world headquarters and serve in the operations research and development department, or ops support. So that department had ownership of all the operating manuals, the materials, training materials, and then was involved in all research and development. So as a project manager in that department, you worked on project teams to roll out new products, equipment, and so on. And I served in that capacity for 6 years before I went back to field operations in 1995. That 6 years was incredibly valuable. And this ties back to my philosophy about always learning. Because even though I went down as an operations specialist, I all of a sudden had this opportunity to work alongside people, peer professionals from every other type of department in the corporation: finance, marketing, engineering, food scientists, product development. Virtually every team had people from all those disciplines, and I soaked up everything I could about their roles. When I was in a project meeting or working on a project, I was always observing. I just wasn't thinking about my operations role. Well, that served me tremendously well when I eventually went on to Firehouse. So fast forward, I leave that R&D function in 1995, go back to the
How,
field
how big
operations.
was how big was BK at the time?
Oh gosh, let's see. When I joined BK, they were about 3,000 restaurants. So I believe it would have been around 7,000, maybe at that point. Actually, I'm not sure of the number today, but probably it's not that far off.
Yeah.
But in 2003, I was back out in the field. I was a franchise field consultant managing a territory that at one point or another went from West Palm Beach in South Florida up as far north as Charleston. And BK was sold in, I think it was late 2002. Bain Capital was part of the acquisition group. I think there might have been another entity or two involved. And then I was let go in March of 2003. Now I didn't see that coming at all.
20 plus years. Yeah, I
I was
wouldn't expect that either.
I was a lifer, 23 years. Even though at that point I'm working remotely, I had great relationships within the organization, people that had been with the brand, mostly from out in the field, that had been with the brand or longer than I have. And by the way, those type of relationships. I mean, that's if you love what you're doing, or you say that you love the brand. The brand's an inanimate thing. I mean, what you really tend to love are the people. That you embrace or share cultural elements with. That's what you're really attached to. I would submit that was a shock to the system. And obviously a lot younger at the time, 22 years number. I'm in my mid 40s, young family. We've been living in Jacksonville for 8 years. My family really wanted to stay in Jacksonville, and my intention was to stay in the restaurant business. It's what I knew and had excelled at. But the options were not many in the Jacksonville market, especially working for a franchisor. I wasn't looking to join up with a franchisee system. Of course, now there are some unbelievably large and successful franchisee entities. That really wasn't the case, 20 years ago, at least that I was aware of, and certainly not tied to Jacksonville. So I started looking at all the options here in this market, and I had virtually no awareness of Firehouse Subs. Firehouse was founded in 1994, coincidentally just months before I moved here.
Okay.
In 95 with Burger King. They opened their first restaurant. It shows how the funny things in life. That first restaurant was maybe about 5 miles from where I was living. But I wasn't a customer. There wasn't a fast casual category. At the time, even though uh, let's say Chipotle, which would be everyone would say, look, if there's a fast casual category, Chipotle is as close to defining it as anyone. Well, I think Chipotle was founded in 1994, if I'm not mistaken. But they were still barely a blip on the radar at in the early 2000s. So it was fast food or casual dining and fine dining. That's uh, how the industry broke down. So I wasn't paying attention to Firehouse Subs. Maybe the only sandwich category competitor that I paid attention to was in my Burger King role was Subway because they're ubiquitous. They were even back then they were at a defining voice when it came to some things about convenience or I should say pricing, value. Yeah, and they were covered by syndicated research in terms of guest satisfaction metrics. And we back then I was mostly Sandelman's Quick Track was the primary tool that I had access to look at, and they had measures that were very strong compared to the quick service hamburger chains for quality, service, cleanliness, and so on. But that was it. That was the limit of my awareness in the sandwich category. So did some research, found out about Firehouse Subs before I went to learn more in person. Of course, I went in to a restaurant that coincidentally was only about a mile and a half from my home, but my family had never tried it, and went in one night just to have the experience with a fresh set of eyes, and in it I saw a ton of potential, level of food quality, the branding. Again, for all I knew, this was just a very local business, but it had some rough edges, right? But for the most part, and especially for something again local and pretty early on in years, had these very very solid brand characteristics that set it apart, or certainly that I didn't expect. So that was my introduction, and over the course of the next couple of weeks, had my first opportunity to meet the founders, Chris Sorensen and Robin Sorensen. Went through a process of a few weeks before they decided that it would be a go and defined the role. I was one of the very first people that came into the organization with professional food service experience. A couple of others, but certainly the first one that came in with deep experience leading within a franchise organization. They had a minority partner that was in the business that had come from the now defunct Quincy's steakhouse chain. And he was at a vice president level and had of a lot of managerial and leadership experience, but all in a company restaurant owned environment. And the art and science of dealing with a franchise system is much different, as it has its own unique skill set. So I was the first person to bring that to the table, and that was my first role, was to lead that part of the organization. And out of those 65 restaurants, 35 of them were company owned, mostly in Jacksonville, but there were also some restaurants in Arkansas that they owned, and then about 30 franchise locations, mostly in Florida and some scattered areas in the Southeast. So I had to get my arms around that. There was a two-tier franchising system, so we had a network of area representatives, and those were people that provided leadership at the DMA level in the markets where they had training restaurants that they owned and operated. Those
the franchisees would have those.
Yes, and so that area rep was actually just a different form of franchise.
Okay.
And it was my first exposure to it.
Mm-hmm.
Subway had used that system, but it was something that was foreign to me. And I will never forget my first conversation with the Sorensens, and they were describing the system. And as I'm sitting there, my wheels are turning, and they're talking about the business arrangement, which was that the area representative would earn half the royalties paid by the franchisee.
Wow.
So Firehouse charged a 6% royalty. The area rep was earning 3 points of the sales in their territory. So that had the potential for the area rep to be an extraordinarily lucrative opportunity.
Yeah.
The average restaurant volume back then was around 600,000 a year. So just do the averages. One restaurant in the territory is generating 18,000 to the area representative. I mean, even if they had just a 10-unit territory that they were providing leadership over and providing services on our behalf,
Yeah.
180,000 of income.
Yeah.
And at that level, they don't even need a staff. Well, it's the best way I could describe their role is as a franchise consultant.
Sure.
Similar to the role that I had with Burger King. Well, that job at that scale, that span of control, to be a coach and a representative for 10 units and draw a $180,000 salary, that opportunity doesn't exist out in the real world.
No, not that I know.
Yeah. So as they're describing this to me, I'm doing the math in my head. And I'm thinking, wow, if I end up landing this gig to provide leadership here, I would think there's a lot better ways to do this. And fast forward 20 years, and that ultimately happened. But many things happened in between. And one of the first things was that I had to get my arms around this area rep system. And if we were going to pay that hefty of a fee to the area rep, then we needed to really get our money's worth out of it. Fundamentally important to get that value. And that's where a lot of my focus went, putting the systems and the processes together to help corral and the energy of that group and make sure that we had the consistency out in the system. And again, really getting our money's worth out of that. And we did. That cadre of area representatives, which we ended up, by the time we were national in breadth, we had just shy of 50 area representatives in the system. And they were a great team of people. And some had developed territories that were over 100 restaurants in size, some that were smaller just by design or because of the length of time that they had been in the system. But they were instrumental players in the success of the brand and maintaining the brand standards and the consistency that was just a trademark for Firehouse Subs for all those years.
That's very cool. And you said that you guys switched off of that model just of recent.
Yeah, it actually started in about 2021 in the wake of the pandemic. Well, we reached a point in time, I should back up, where the area representatives, some of them had been in the system for quite some time, over 20 years at that point, and were reaching a point in time in their careers where they were considering retirement. And they did have the opportunity in their agreement to sell the territory, but that was easier said than done. So long story short, in early 2021, even I think it was late 2020, some of those area representatives started coming forward with an interest to exit. And in the absence of being able to do lucrative deals with third parties to come in and take over the territories, we were able to negotiate a sale of the territory back to us. And so we started first on a small scale, just with a couple of territories that came back under corporate control, started to build out a new part of the organization to provide leadership in the area representative's wake. And that was not an easy task, because they were highly proficient people that had been in their roles, again, for many, many years, had great relationships with their franchisees. And the franchisees could have been skeptical. One of the commitments I made to the franchisees at the time was that as we built this new part of the organization, we were going to invest. Because as soon as we wrapped up things with the area representative, now 100% of the royalties coming back to us. We pick up that 3 percentage points and the franchisees completely aware of this. And the natural question in their mind is, well, what's in it for us? Are we going to be deprived of service? We had this person we've known for the past 15, 20 years. They're gone. They were jacks of all trades. As part of their responsibilities, they had to provide services, marketing, public relations, operations, real estate. They had a broad base. I didn't think that I could realistically bring in just a single person that could offer all of that. So we had to build out field teams and expand our organization with multiple players to service each area. Dedicated real estate people, dedicated marketing, dedicated public relations, obviously an operations person, replace and fill in. And our goal was not just replace and fill in what had been there, but to take it a step up. And I think we did a good job of that. So that whole process began just organically, and coincidentally, then the founders started to begin the process of pursuing the sale of the company in late 2021. And at that point, or before the sale of the company was executed, if I recall, I think we had about 40 to 45% of the system of area reps that were already back under corporate control and management. So then that it was clearly of interest, I think, to everyone to execute that buybacks across the rest of the system. So by the time that the sale was completed, or shortly thereafter, I think within the next 3 months or so in early 2022, I believe all but 2 of the territories have been reacquired, and then since then, I believe all of them are back.
That's pretty cool. So you get to go on a wild run with a bunch of successful operators. You get to watch them exit successfully, and you get to do it yourself and with the original founders of the business. So I think that's the dream, right? Everyone wants to work their butt off, and they get to see a little bit of a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, and to share it is a very special thing. So hats off to you on that. That's very cool.
Yeah, thanks. It was a unbelievable professional and personal experience to be able to do it. And again, one that I could have never anticipated.
Fair enough. But it was that openness to learning.
I was going to say, as it turned out, being let go from Burger King was the best thing that could have happened. Which by the way, I would say, and the things that you never put on your bingo card. Here when I became aware of the sale, the intent to sell, and then discovered that Restaurant Brands International was one of the interested parties and ultimately the winning party. I thought about the irony of that after 23 years with Burger King and basically back with Burger King.
Yeah, that is pretty funny.
Under RBI. But certainly from my perspective, that ended up being a very positive thing.
Well,
just because I was so familiar with the Burger King history and had that connecting thread with the current generation of people over at Restaurant Brands International.
To touch on that too, so you had the exit in mid 22, or let's call it early Q2 22, right? How much longer did you stay on before you decided to retire?
So I stayed for about a year and a half.
Year and a half
after the transition.
And was that by choice or by just kind of wanting to see it through, or what was the intention there?
Yeah, that was by choice. I initially with the sale, I had an agreement to stay longer by several years. But personally, I had a bit of a life-changing moment in late 2021. This is before, not long before, I was aware of the potential sale, and I had a heart attack. My wife and I were hiking in the mountains of North Carolina, Grandfather Mountain on Profile Trail, and I did not think I was going to make it. I had to be rescued off the mountain. I write about this a lot in the book that'll be coming out. But I did not think I was going to survive it.
Wow.
And
oof.
So even at that point, after thank God I had no permanent damage. If you had told me at the time that that's the way it would end up, I would have said no way. I've never been anything through
How
anything.
far up the mountain were you? How far were you back
We
from
were at about
civilization?
5,400 feet.
Oh my God, your poor wife, you, everybody's freaking out. I mean, that is
I was
a
just it
very,
was just my wife and I, and she had gone a bit ahead of me on the trail,
oh
so
man.
I was back. She was maybe at least a couple hundred yards. I don't know. She was out of sight, and she's 7 years, 6.5 years younger than I am, a little more fit. She went shooting up, and I was a bit fatigued after because we were quite. I don't know what elevation we were when we started, but we'd been going for quite a while up the side of the mountain, and all of a sudden, wham! It
Oh my
just
God.
hit me, and I was down and had the presence of mind. And this was a blessing being around first responders and
Yes.
hearing so many stories from the Sorensens. One thing I realized right away was, man, don't panic. And I had to really focus on not hyperventilating uh, because I guess your body's being starved of oxygen. You have the pain and everything else is happening, but you could not catch my breath. And I knew if I didn't work consciously to try to control myself. If I lost consciousness, if I hyperventilated, it was probably going to be over. So I just focused on that, and I managed to reach her with a text because I couldn't get a cell phone, couldn't dial 911. Fortunately, she got the text and came racing back, and she had to then leave me to go get a cell signal to call. So it was about an hour and 20 minutes before first responders could get there because they had to hike up the mountain and probably too much information, probably. But anyway,
No, not at all. Thank you for sharing. I mean, that sounds like I go hiking, and my worst fear when I'm hiking is if anything happened here, there's nothing you can do about it. It's over. Like, and well, I'm glad to hear I need to stay calm. So nothing to do with the dine and grind world, but just stay calm if you're on the mountain and things go wrong.
yeah, so I was very fortunate, but in the wake of that, really started to think differently about. I had never thought about retirement or anything before that, but I thought, okay, maybe I need to kick back. And keep in mind, this was on the tail of COVID, which at Firehouse we did fantastic emerging coming through the pandemic. Like virtually everybody, it was terrible at first,
Sure.
but we had gotten back to positive comp sales after only 10 weeks. And that was
10 weeks in.
10 weeks into
10
the
weeks.
pandemic. That was after an
Wow.
initial 4 weeks of about 45% negative.
Yeah, but I mean, 10 weeks is unheard of. I don't know anyone who bounced back that quickly.
Yeah, from week 5 to 10, we got back to even comp sales, and then from that point forward, increasingly positive. So that by the time we got to the end of the year, we had regained everything in sales that we had lost during that 10-week negative stretch. But that was, I'll back up. I always thought I did a pretty good job of managing pressure and stress related to leadership. Uh, the stress level during the worst part of COVID, and I'm sure I share this with many people, was just off the charts. I mean, I had nights where I would be laying in bed, just my head spinning about all the things that we needed to do, and I was literally getting maybe at best a couple hours of sleep. Just so consumed with worry. And because in leadership, worrying not about myself, worrying about the team, my franchise community, everything that was at stake. I mean, there was the very real prospect that we could have lost hundreds of restaurants. Yeah, after all the work, the effort to build up a system, at that point to get it to over 1,000 restaurants and see it potentially come crashing down. Because 45, as I told my team, 45% negative sales is not sustainable. And at the time, you don't know when you're going to come out of it. But all of that was stressful, And so that was, fortunately, it got a little bit more relaxed once things got recovered. But fast forward to that, summer of 2021, we were still in a pretty stressful environment. And so for the first time, I started to think about maybe I need to really, for myself and my family, take a step back and think about retirement. And then I'm no sooner am I having that thought, hadn't even floated the suggestion by the founders, word came to me that, well, they're looking at selling. And any thought of retiring went to the back. Uh, and then my mission became primarily for my team, uh, to successfully navigate through the transition, because it's a starkly different world going from a closely held private company, which, we were very proud of the fact that we had finally eclipsed the 1 billion in system sales, and had barely had time to celebrate that. Then we're sold, and then at the time became part of a $35 billion enterprise, in system sales. And it's a bit humbling, and changes your perspective on the 1 billion contribution that you have to the entity that you're now a part of. For me, it was a great professional challenge to lead the organization through that, because the restaurant industry has no shortage of histories and experiences where those things are not well managed, or disastrous in some cases. So it was a professional opportunity and challenge for me to do that with as much success as we could muster. And I think we did. I was proud of the job that we did. Not to say that there weren't changes within the team and so on. That was inevitable, simply because now you're, as part of a brand new organization, you have a whole different set of resources and so on, and some duplicative services with the headquarters for the overall brand. So there was bound to be change, as there is in all.
Well, and then they wouldn't buy you unless they thought there was some efficiencies that they would approve on, and the revenue multiple and all that fun stuff. So,
yes, and we were performing at extraordinarily high level. So it wasn't like a situation where we were a struggling brand, or somebody was picking up because they thought we were a low performer and had to be rescued or something of that sort. We were extremely high performing in terms of our financial performance and our operational metrics. Over the years, I was always tremendously proud of our measures. I relied a lot on Technomic as a primary benchmarking tool through their.
I'm not familiar with It's Technomic.
Technomic. So they are. In my opinion, they're the leading analysts in the restaurant industry, and they have a product called Consumer Brand Metrics, which I'm not sure of the number now, but up until a couple years ago, on a quarterly basis, released information on 160 restaurant brands. Very robust consumer analytics, consumer surveys on, I think, a total of over 60 attributes that are measured in their study. So I had the capacity to measure in a quantifiable way, not only Firehouse's performance, but I was able to benchmark that against 160 other brands. And we did extraordinarily well. I remember in one year, I think it was 2015, we had the highest overall rating in the restaurant industry, overall satisfaction, and the highest rating for food quality, taste and flavor of food, as they call it. We had a higher score. I talked about this often with pride. Ruth's Chris was number 2.
Okay, that was a big deal.
So we set the bar very high, and always challenged ourselves to maintain or earn top positions. Because in the end, it's your customers' vote and measure that counts the most. I always gave that the highest priority compared to whatever internal measures that we had. If the what the customer thinks is what's most important.
Yeah. Yeah. And I imagine as a franchise brand that's grown that large, that fast, to see that type of success in those categories is in itself unbelievable. Like, okay, great, you won, but you won given a very difficult deck of cards in the process. And I think that's very cool to hear. And I would love to, just because I know we're going to start to wrap up here, but I would love to know if there was a secret sauce, maybe specifically actually a secret sauce, but was there something there that allowed you? And it's hard. I'm going to ask for one thing, but was there one thing that you could really point at that'd be like, that was really what helped us get from 50 to 1,000 and maintain or improve those quality scores?
Yeah, this is going to sound like a cliche, but it was all about culture.
Okay.
Yeah, and it was very early on, going back to 2009, 2010. I had to make sure that we articulated that culture.
That was your job.
That was it. And then make sure that everything we did in the organization supported that or improved upon it. And because if the culture of the company was understood and embraced down to the restaurant level, that was our guarantee for success. In the absence of that, we'd be fighting inconsistency and weak performance constantly, and trying to elevate it through technical measures and follow up. And no, the main way you get there is to have, starting with leadership of the franchisee, to embrace the culture, which includes, for our brand, it was three things. It was hearty and flavorful food, heartfelt service, and the support of public safety. That was our mission statement. That was at the heart of our culture. If you were going to be part of the Firehouse Subs system, you needed to embrace those three things, not two. 2 out of 3 doesn't work. Yeah, you could love your guests and be into hospitality, and you could love our food. But if you weren't supporting your community through Public Safety Foundation, you didn't have the complete formula. You weren't living by our culture.
A wise man once said it's either 100%. It's not 110 and it's not 90. It's either 100% of that.
And it really is that simple. And the challenge, one thing I knew from my past experiences was that if you're blessed to have a great culture, my gosh, do everything you can to protect it, because when you lose it, it is extraordinarily difficult to get back. So that it really was that one fundamental thing that drove everything we did over the better part of my 20 years there.
Wow. Amazing. Well, let's wrap it up with one part that I think is a huge part of that culture, and it was taking care of our service heroes, right? Of the people who are in service of us. So that includes firemen, police, city. I mean, I imagine it's all the support of the community. So you told me when we started this call that you're about to hit the $100 million threshold for your nonprofit, and there's hospitality, the community, they are in service of others. You don't go into food service typically unless you actually really want to make other people's days brighter. But it's a very different thing to serve sandwiches and do it with a smile and with love and with heart and with great food. But to get to $100 million, I mean, and I was reading the story, and maybe you could just kind of give us this one last tidbit, and I think the viewers will really appreciate this. But you donated to the Jaws of Life, and why don't you share what happened? Because when I read it, I almost teared up. It was just such a cool story.
We had a donation event out in the Panhandle of Florida. I can't remember the exact year now, but it was certainly over 10 years ago. And did a donation of a Jaws of Life, which is a pneumatic tool that helps pry open vehicles and accidents, gets the first responder access to the victims. And it was on, it was, I think, on December 31st that the donation was made. The next night, it was used for the first time. There was an accident where a car had plowed head on into a tree. There were 2 young men obviously in the front, and the driver was especially injured, to a great extent, life-threatening injuries. So they get to him, and fortunately, the first responders have this new tool, and they're able to extricate him, get him to the hospital, and he survives. The amazing thing about that story is that that young man that was driving the car was an employee of Firehouse Subs
Wow.
for the franchisee in that market where the donation was given.
It's incredible.
And the one thing that's very unique about the Firehouse Subs Public Safety Foundation and supporting first responders is that chances are every single person is going to need the assistance of a first responder at some time or another. It is bound to happen. And there are many, many, many great charities, thousands of them out there, but most can't make that statement that their work has the potential to touch every single life that's out there. And we can be pretty sure of this. In the absence, well, let me back up. One time, the head of the advertising agency that we were working with, Stan Richards, the advertising agency now is known as TRG. Stan Richards was an icon in the advertising and marketing world. And very early in our relationship with him, he asked the Firehouse team members that were present a fundamental question. He said, look, if Firehouse Subs just ceased to exist today, what difference would it really make? And he said, well, gosh, the world may not have access to a great sandwich, but there's other sandwich places. Yes, franchisees are going to have some financial hardship. People will be out of work, but they'll find something else. They'll get another job somewhere else. The world will go on. But the fundamental thing, the fundamental impact if Firehouse Subs ceased to exist, and with it, Firehouse Subs Public Safety Foundation, is we know that in the absence of that, lives would be lost. Because every piece of equipment that's used that has life-saving capacity, every time it's been used, is saving a life. And if we arguably hadn't been there to fulfill that grant, make that equipment available, it would have potentially cost someone their life. So really the main mission,
saving lives,
it was that drove us for years, was our success meant the Public Safety Foundation's success. And I hope that is the one legacy element more than any other that continues to thrive within Firehouse Subs.
That's very cool. And I mean, we talked about this, but I lost my house in a fire, and that was my first time ever really dealing with a first responder. And I just then started to notice, what it is that they do and what it is that we need in those moments. And it's really special that you've created a flywheel that gives back to that community when we all know it's so important. And after hearing it from you, I'm more excited than ever to share that part of your story and to be in support of it any way I can. So thank you for that. Yeah, of course. Well, this has been an incredible hour. We have a rapid fire question that we like to do at the end. It's a bunch of questions. They're really simple and fun. And I would love to see what your responses are. And I haven't given these to you prior. So the first one is a doozy. If there were 3 key ingredients to your lifetime of success, what are those 3 key ingredients?
Leading by example, optimism, and empathy.
Omakase tasting, chef's tasting, or a la carte menu?
A la carte menu.
Okay. Aged wine or craft cocktail?
Aged wine.
Front of house or back of house?
Back of the house.
Okay. Would you rather have dessert or an extra savory plate?
Dessert.
Dessert. Okay. What's the most special dessert for you? What's your favorite?
Oh gosh. I love a really good cheesecake.
Okay. Amen. Daily special or customer favorite?
Customer favorite.
Okay. Smash burger or full-size patty?
A full-size patty.
Okay. Wow, not on the trend. I like it. Neapolitan pizza or New York slice?
New York slice.
And then a Michelin fancy meal or a Michelin hole in the wall?
Oh, man. I'd go for the hole in the wall.
Go for the hole in the wall. Amen. Me too. All right, Don. Well, huge thanks. Thank you for showing us that purpose can be the best growth engine in the game. Remember, a single sub can buy the gear that saves a life. That's impact. Don, I learned so much from you in this past hour. You can follow Don's adventures on LinkedIn. Please check out these books when they come out. I am so excited to grab a copy. We'll make sure we share it. And until next time, keep dining, keep grinding. Thank you for being here with us for this last hour.